It was supposed to be just another flight, another routine boarding call. A young black teenager, excited to travel, steps onto the plane with his backpack and a big smile, nothing out of the ordinary. But within minutes, everything takes a sharp turn. A white pilot, eyeing him suspiciously, decides something doesn't look right. Without asking questions or speaking to the boy, he quietly calls airport security. Moments later, officers are approaching the teen, asking him to step aside, their tones serious and cold. Confused and scared, he doesn't know what he did wrong. Passengers glance over, whispers start, and the tension in the cabin thickens. But just when it seems like things are spiraling out of control, someone steps into the scene, a woman in a crisp business suit, walking with quiet confidence. She doesn't hesitate. She walks straight up to the officers, looks the pilot in the eye, and says something that stops everyone in their tracks. Asterisk, that's my son, and I own this airline. Asterisk. The cabin goes silent. The pilot's face turns pale. No one expected this. What started as a quick judgment just became something much, much bigger. What happens next? You're not going to believe how the rest unfolds. Everyone stared. The pilot, still holding the phone, slowly lowered it, stunned. He looked from the boy to the woman, trying to process what she just said. The officers shifted uncomfortably. No one moved. The teenager, still silent, kept his eyes on his mom. Relief washed over his face, but the damage had already been done. This wasn't just any mother. Her name was Dana Reynolds. She wasn't loud or flashy, but anyone in the aviation industry knew her name. A former pilot herself, she worked her way up, starting as a flight attendant, then becoming one of the few black women pilots in the country, and eventually building her own regional airline from the ground up. People respected her, but clearly this pilot didn't recognize her. Or maybe he did, and just didn't expect her asterisk son to be traveling alone, casually dressed, not in first class. Dana's calm didn't mean she wasn't furious. She asked the officers a simple question. What was the reason for detaining my son? No one had a real answer, just vague words like suspicious behavior and protocol. But what protocol says a teenage passenger can be pulled aside without cause? And still, the pilot said nothing. But something in his eyes said this wasn't just about confusion. It felt deeper, and far from over. Dana's eyes were steady as she turned to the officers, who were still trying to process the situation. She didn't raise her voice, but there was a quiet authority in her tone that made everyone pay attention. She asked the same question again. The officers shifted uneasily, glancing at each other, but no one had an answer that made sense. Meanwhile, her son, Malik, stood frozen beside her. He hadn't said a word since the confrontation began. His body was tense, but his mind was racing. He couldn't understand how something so simple, just boarding a flight to visit his dad, had spiraled into this. He'd never been treated like this before. But then again, he had never been on a flight where a white pilot had been so quick to assume the worst. Malik had always been proud of his mom. She'd built everything from the ground up, proving time and again that no matter the odds, she could make it. And yet, in this moment, standing beside her in the very airline she owned, he felt small. Like he didn't belong. But his mom wasn't going to let anyone make him feel that way, not without a fight. Dana's mind was working fast. She knew this wasn't just about Malik. This was about something larger, the way people of color were often treated differently, unfairly, based on assumptions that didn't hold up under scrutiny. She could feel the weight of every eye on her, the passengers watching in stunned silence, some trying to hide their phones, others just trying to avoid the growing tension. But Dana wasn't going to back down. She knew that if she didn't stand up now, it wasn't just about Malik anymore. It would be about every other person who had been wrongly judged, mistreated, or discriminated against. The pilot finally spoke up, his voice shaky, but trying to sound authoritative. "I just thought," he looked out of place, he said, his words trailing off as if he knew how weak they sounded now. Dana didn't flinch. "What exactly did he look like?" she asked. The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. She was digging for something that could make him answer truthfully, something that could expose the true nature of what had just happened. Dana's mind was working fast. She knew this wasn't just about Malik. This was about something larger, the way people of color were often treated differently, unfairly, based on assumptions that didn't hold up under scrutiny. She could feel the weight of every eye on her, the passengers watching in stunned silence, some trying to hide their phones, others just trying to avoid the growing tension. But Dana wasn't going to back down. She knew that if she didn't stand up now, it wasn't just about Malik anymore. It would be about every other person who had been wrongly judged, mistreated, or discriminated against. The pilot finally spoke up, his voice shaky, but trying to sound authoritative. "I just thought," he looked out of place, he said, his words trailing off as if he knew how weak they sounded now. Dana didn't flinch. "What exactly did he look like?" she asked. The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. She was digging for something that could make him answer truthfully, something that could expose the true nature of what had just happened. Dana's mind raced. A video like this could spread like wildfire. It could tarnish the airline's reputation, but more than that, it could turn this whole situation into a media storm. As much as she wanted to focus on the injustice her son was facing, she knew the stakes had just gotten even higher. The officer, still waiting for his call to be answered, was oblivious to the shift. Dana's thoughts were now divided. She needed to protect Malik and fix this mess. But the viral video meant every move she made would be scrutinized. And that's when things took another unexpected turn. A voice broke through the growing tension. "We need to speak with the head of operations right now." Dana turned sharply to see a tall figure, someone she hadn't expected. It was one of her own senior pilots, a man she trusted, but who had a reputation for being hard-headed. He had a stern look on his face, the kind of expression that made Dana's pulse quicken. He looked past her, straight at the officers, then at the pilot. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded. His presence alone felt like a pivot in the entire situation. Now it wasn't just about the officers or the pilot. It was about Dana's internal team getting involved. And suddenly, everything felt even more chaotic. The stakes were no longer just about one flight. The image of her airline, her reputation, and even her leadership were at risk. The officer with the radio seemed to hesitate for a moment, as if unsure how to react. The senior pilot didn't wait for an answer. "Dana, let's take this to the back," he said, motioning for her to step aside. "We can talk strategy before this escalates any further." Dana knew she was at a crossroads. The decision to take control of this situation would either preserve her company's future or ignite an even larger scandal. And with Malik watching her closely, she realized just how much was riding on what happened next. Dana followed her senior pilot to the back of the plane, her mind spinning with a million thoughts. Malik stayed behind, still standing there, surrounded by the officers and the restless passengers. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on her chest. She couldn't let this slide. The pilot had crossed a line, but so had the system. She needed a solution, something that would protect her son, her airline, and the future of everyone involved. The senior pilot led her into a small galley area where they could speak privately, away from prying eyes. He closed the door behind them, his expression hardening. Dana, this is a mess. The video is everywhere, and people are already taking sides. You have to act fast. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. I know, but I need to get this right, or it won't just be the airline's reputation on the line. It'll be Malik's too. The senior pilot nodded, his face softening just a little. You're right. But listen, we can't just sweep this under the rug. You've worked too damn hard for that. You need to show them who's in charge. Make it clear that discrimination won't be tolerated here. Dana's phone buzzed again. Another notification. Her heart dropped when she saw the headline. Asterisk black teen detained on flight. Airline owner's son at the center of scandal. Asterisk. Her hands shook for a second as she looked up at the senior pilot. I have to confront this head-on. There's no other way. He sighed, then pulled out his own phone. I'll handle the rest of the staff. We'll make sure the narrative doesn't get completely out of control. You just focus on Malik. Just as they were about to step back out, Dana froze, a new message popping up on her phone. This time, it wasn't from her assistant. It was from Malik. The text was short. Asterisk Mom, he's coming. Asterisk. Before she could process the message, the door to the galley swung open. The senior pilot's eyes widened. Standing in the doorway was the same officer who had been holding the radio earlier. But this time, he wasn't alone. A man in a suit, tall and imposing, stepped forward behind the officer. Dana's breath caught when she recognized him. He was the airline's head of operations, the very person who should have been on her side from the beginning. But his expression was cold, calculating. He wasn't here to help. He was here to make sure everything stayed contained. The same man who had been a constant presence in her company's meetings, someone she had trusted. Dana, he said smoothly, it's time we put an end to this. Her heart sank. She had a gut feeling this wasn't going to go the way she wanted. What do you mean? She asked, her voice low but steady. The man smiled slightly, but there was no warmth in it. I've seen the video. It's getting attention, too much attention. And I'm afraid the PR fallout could be catastrophic for us. We can't afford any more delays. The decision has been made. Dana felt a chill. What decision? The airline is going to release a public statement saying that the situation was a misunderstanding. Malik will be removed from the spotlight, and we'll pretend this never happened. Her stomach turned. She had a decision to make, and there was no turning back. But just as she opened her mouth to respond, the door to the galley opened again. Malik stood there, looking directly at the man in the suit. His expression was calm, but his eyes burned with determination. He had clearly overheard the conversation. I'm not a mistake, Malik said, his voice steady, stronger than it had been before. And neither is anyone who looks like me. You can't just erase this. Dana's heart swelled with pride as she looked at her son. But then, to her shock, Malik did something unexpected. He reached into his pocket and held up his own phone. In his hand, he had a new video, one that showed not just the confrontation, but the moments leading up to it. It was clear now. The pilot's eyes, the tension in the cabin, the way he had spoken to the officers, it was all captured. And as the video finished, Malik's final words played over the speakers in the cabin. Asterisk, this isn't just about one flight. This is about all of us. We're not your stereotypes. Asterisk. The man in the suit's face went pale, his confidence evaporating in an instant. The tension in the room was thick, and the silence that followed was deafening. Dana knew, in that moment, that everything had changed. This wasn't just about an airline scandal anymore. This was about standing up, speaking out, and holding people accountable. As Malik turned to face her, their eyes locked, And for the first time in a long while, Dana felt a true sense of resolve. No matter what happened next, this fight was far from over.